All right, so we're live. This is exciting.
Yes.
I I am going to talk about kindness with
Mm.
my friend that I have known for years, and we've never actually laid eyes on each other. But I'm really glad that you were willing to do this with me, Brendan,
Of course.
because just as we've discussed, I think, and as I've been discussing with people. This idea of this four pillars project that the Global Theater Project is putting out is really connected to sort of the basis of our work
Mm.
for what I label more as theater for social renewal
Mm.
than theater for social change. And so there's these four pillars that hold the whole thing up that have been defined over the years. And the first one really is kindness.
Mm.
And yesterday we talked about kindness with two people who, one of them is not, I met him in the theater in high school, but he has not
wow.
been a theater person for 30 years.
Oh, wow.
And he had a lot to say about it. It was a very interesting conversation. And there were some things that came out of it that I'll share with you and see what you think about that. But really talking about how we have to grow a culture that allows people to learn how to be kind, that it sometimes is maybe needs to be taught and grown into a person, that maybe there's aspects of it that are not innate, that are more, what's the word? Well, they're not primitive to us necessarily. So that was an interesting conversation. And also then it makes me think a lot about theater. And we talked about theater as well, and where theater is innately kind, where we have kind practices, where we push against kindness, where our sense of community and communication and all of these aspects and our fearlessness to go into community. And that's also why I want to speak to you, because you worked abroad. And that is a very unique thing that most people, that takes a lot of courage to enter into another culture and live another life, having both done it, we both know what that means.
Sure.
So I'd like to just hear a little bit, from you at first, this how this idea of kindness in terms of our work and community plays out for you, and then just sort of ask questions.
Sure. Oh, I'd be happy to. I think, generally speaking, theater people have a tradition or a kind of habit of always working together to create something that's larger than any individual that's part of that micro community or ensemble or production. So I think we have a lot of reference points in our artistic professions about, I'm contributing this work and it's for not just me, but it's also for these other folks as well. Or there's this dynamism between the more I give, the more I also receive. And so there's this connection. And I feel like we are experiencing that with the coronavirus here in New York City, in the sense of, if I wear a mask, it's not just for my own health, it's not just for my own benefit, but it's also communicating something socially that I'm also concerned for other people's health. Not just people I know, not just people that I have personal contact with, but that there's a declaration of, I want all of us to be well. I want all of us to survive, and this is what I can do. So yes, it's challenging and it's inconvenient, or even in many cases for theater people, unspeakably painful, because we don't have the ability to assemble to do the making of theater right now. We don't have the ability to present what we've made, which requires an assembly of people together in public space. So all of that is making us kind of real with questions about, what are we doing? How long will this occur? What's the future look like? And I think that pillar of kindness is crucial because the conversations I'm having with my friends and colleagues here is this questioning about this return to normal, as if the normal what is a place to return to. Like, I think there's a desire to, of course, be able to leave our apartments or homes and have freedom of movement, have the ability to embrace friends on the street without it being a second thought, to do our work, to teach face to face with performers. But it's also more about, it's a chance to see, can we build something better, because the theater world is a microcosm of the larger world, and there's a lot of challenges and problems that we still have to change.
When you said build something better, the question, which I love that question, can we build something better? You also said, when we were chatting the other day, you talked about fragility and the fragility of an artist's life.
Oh, yeah.
And I was thinking that, I mean, we both know that what that is, right? We both lived that and live that fragility. We're living it right now. But it seems to me that the entire world is learning about fragility at the moment. And
yeah, I mean,
how their systems are breaking down, what they always knew. I mean, I have a friend who's a restaurateur, and his world is crashing down around him, and he doesn't know what to do. He doesn't have maybe the tool set that we innately develop, because it has always been an accepted part of being an artist. But it's not an accepted part necessarily of people who have more of a reliance on, this is how my world works and this is how I work within the world. And I'm just wondering what the engagement of kindness in this way might have to do to assist a sense of fragility that we may offer our fellow community members as sojourners through fragility. So that we can turn it around a little bit, and instead of being victims, we could be teachers and healers and helpers. It's a question.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think I think it was Madonna who said that the coronavirus is the great equalizer, in the sense that it's affecting everyone. And I understand what she's saying, but I would, the distinction is that within that, we are not all having this identical experiences.
No.
Like, so for some, they have a second home to travel to with their family, and they're essentially bored for a few months. Just, should we go on a hike today? Should we paint the house? What do you want to watch on Netflix? And that's fine. There's others in New York City who literally have lost their livelihoods and do not know if they will make it past June 1, or when it's safe to open, will they have a job? Will their institution open? And even if it does, will anyone want to assemble? There was a recent survey that said 49% of Americans, even when it's safe, do not want to go to live theater, live concerts. They don't want to be around people.
Right.
And to have the kindness to understand that, rather than this push, like, come on, we should. And so on the one hand, there's a lot of comparing of, well, the stimulus package or the relief package from the United States government, who does that benefit? There are people who are undocumented, who we rely upon for our fabric of living, that aren't going to get any of that in New York State so far. And so some people are bemoaning, well, it's so little compared to Germany or Sweden. On the other hand, it's far more than some people in parts of Africa or Latin America. So it's all about, well, where do we shift that lens? And I think part of the kindness is, are we willing to look at all of it, which means stepping out of our own experience too. And I think theater people and performing artists generally do have some practice about getting out of the comfort zone and saying, well, I know this from my own experience, but it's not a tautology. It's not a monolith. It's not something that is necessarily universal. Can I put that aside and listen and learn? And I think that's those are some of the essential requirements for kindness.
Yeah.
So that it's not about trying to have everyone have the same experience. Like, we're all going to be fine. We're all going to get through this. Everything's going to be okay. Rather than, well, some of us already have not made it. They're gone. They've died, or they're dying, or they've lost their homes. They've lost their money. They are really, really, really stressed out. So to say like we're all going to make it sort of puts those people as some kind of depressing television show that you can just turn off,
So
rather
what?
than saying we're all together and we all need to find out how can all of us, as much as possible, see how we can connect, how we can help, rather than just those that agree with one philosophy or one experience.
So what I'm also pulling out of what you're saying, which is really kind of an interesting idea, is that in kindness is honesty. Like,
Oh, absolutely.
what you're saying is honest observation of what's going on, honest reaction, honest response. And that without that, you're not actually being kind.
Absolutely. Because I mean,
That's so interesting.
well, it's easy to feel compassion and love for people you already love, like children, siblings, friends. Um, it's easy to love and feel kindness towards far away people singing from Italian balconies that one may never meet, and be like, yes, but it's like, well, what about the people at the local bodega who don't have gloves, don't have a mask, but have to go to work because they're maybe living in a 2-bedroom apartment with 5 other people, and they make less than minimum wage. They don't have health insurance. They maybe don't even have a social security number. So they can't benefit from these things, which are stressing out many Americans too. So there's all these different ways that we need to try to lean into the conversation. I mean, um, as you know, I'm sure there's a number of protests happening in different parts of the United States about the shelter-in-place orders, and so some people feel that well, we're adults, we're free, we should be able to go wherever we want, right? And so they are protesting by blocking traffic to get into hospitals. So it seems like, well, I don't know how that expresses kindness, because it doesn't seem to be. It seems to be more about like it's either or. Like, well, I want to go out, so I'm going to prevent others from doing their job, without it really helping. Because I don't feel like the choice should be human lives and health versus my freedom to go shopping. I feel like the least I can do is try to understand, like, well, what's the best I can do, but put others in the equation. Because I feel like that's part of the challenge, is like only thinking about my small world. And I think perhaps theater people or practitioners who are engaged in a artistic practice which involves groups of people as a kind of de rigueur, that's really an opportunity to apply those same principles in our moment as a society, to say, well, yes, I personally am inconvenienced, but there's others who are far more inconvenienced, and others that are maybe not inconvenienced at all. But what's the bigger picture? This is it's a health crisis. It's a series of policy failures. It's an opportunity. It's a grieving process. Um, but of course, kindness is easy to do when everything is fine. It's much more important and vital, and even more meaningful when it's not easy.
You really have laid out a lot of things I want to ask you about,
Sure.
but I'll try to remember all of them. But the bouncing off the last thing you said, which is kindness is easy and when things are easy, it's that's kind of why I wanted to start with this pillar. First of all, because I think it really is the underlying foundation of a healthy society has to be caring for one another. And I think this virus is showing without any doubt that we have rips in that fabric. And because of that, all the things you laid out are inevitable. It's inevitable that those that we don't care for will not be cared for in a crisis. It's inevitable that those who are self-focused or don't feel a part of a caring community will only care for themselves, even to the harm of others by blocking a hospital entry or street up to one, even toward that, which is potentially hurting a life, and not making that connection. That's where these things fall apart. So that's what I was thinking from what the last thing you said. But the thing that I'd love to brainstorm about with you, and I'm not even sure if I'm going to be articulating this really well, is with everything that you just said, this whole fabric of our community and society and the way that we interact and the way that we care or don't care for one another. And the fact that theater artists and other arts that are community-driven collectives of, who create together in some sort of collaborative process. We understand how both wonderful and how difficult it is to bring human beings together. Like the hardest thing in the world is for human beings to learn how to create a world, to create a society and a culture. And we do that with every project we work on. We have new members of that community that we have to understand the language of and the culture, and we, have to build something new all the time.
Yes.
If this is not, if what you said before, there's no normal to get back to, because that normal that's out the train and, out of the station and gone. And there's a new one that needs to be evolving. How can we utilize our selves, our gifts, to be partners in a kind world? How can we become participants and makers of kindness, of kind society as theater artists? That's a question that I'd love to hear your thoughts on.
Sure. I mean, I think in a way, as a way to begin answering that, it's not as though there was normal and this moment is somehow an interlude and then normal is coming this fall. I think
to a theater near you.
Well, yeah, it's like this is the normal.
Yeah.
And for I imagine if the folks that know more about epidemiology than I do, and how urban centers, rural communities, how these all work together, policies, governments, health officials, capacity, knowledge, equipment, economy, all these things, it seems like this will probably be like this at least for 2 years, at least. It's not going to be like we're going to be out by summer and phew, got through that. It'll just be probably a series of gradual reopening, returning to shelter in place when there's another flare up, going back out. And so it's requires change. It's a new era. So I think in terms of theater, I mean, theater is often much more local than, say, a film or a television production, which has similar elements in terms of this group creative collaboration. But excuse me, a video document of a live performance is not the same as the live performance. The live performance happens in that space, that building with those people at that time. And So I think the thinking of theater people tends to be more local and grassroots generally than a kind of nationwide or worldwide scope. Although though I think that is also changing and has changed. I think it's encouraging to think of, for example, institutions like Theater of the Oppressed New York or the Chocolate Factory, Abrams Art Center. Like these are small organizations compared to MoMA, but they're really trying to find ways to how can we pay our colleagues and our staff? How can we make sure that these people who have been devastated don't get just thrown to the wolves? Whereas these larger institutions, by contrast, unfortunately, they will just lay off everybody and then continue to do some kind of online facsimile of their programming with a vague hope of someday we'll open again in the future. So, so I think that's one way that specific arts organizations that are small are trying to look out for their own community, because it's who knows when these larger federal programs will reach people. There's been a lot of micro grants that have formed to help various sectors within the community, which I think is helpful. And again, those are grassroots driven. I think that it's the circumstances have required a rethink about how is education transmitted, which I think is it's a great question to have anyway with the performing arts, but because of these new conditions, it's really bringing that conversation much more to the foreground, makes it feel more urgent about how can I communicate what I do and have it be relevant or useful with this new medium. And also what's lost in that medium. Like not everything is it's not everything is interchangeable from being in public space together and then being on a screen remotely from one another.
Well, we're both teaching, right? I mean, you're teaching, and so am I. And
Yeah.
it's absolutely true to go from having built a group of disparate young people who then become somehow a cohesive unit, and then suddenly they're spread out, and some of them are lost forever because they don't have access to Wi-Fi, or they don't have technology that can get them engaged. And then the others, you have to really try to find ways to pull them in. The one thing that I was thinking recently, I don't know what you might think of this, is that as a theater artist and educator, we work in a live medium.
Mm-hmm.
But I've been saying to my students that I want them to start thinking about what does it mean to transfer that concept from being in a live medium to being in a living medium. And so really kind of looking at this virtual world as an opportunity to do what we're doing right now, right? Which is connect us to living beings, but we're not necessarily in a live environment.
Yeah.
And how much can we retain of the live environment to at least awaken the humanity of one another? Like, what is that possibility?
Yeah.
That's something that I've been looking at lately.
Yeah. No, and I think that's really stimulating and engaging. I mean, excuse me. I think there's a difference between, say, a playwright and a group of actors that in the midst of this moment go, well, maybe we could do like a radio theater style version of this reading or of this production. Now, it's not the same as what we originally intended, but it seems to be of interest for those artists. And I feel like that's interesting. Or musicians that are doing these intimate concerts from their living rooms at a live platform because they can't go to their venues to perform publicly. So I think that's a different thing than perhaps a video documentation of a live play where you don't capture really the experience of being in the room there, because it's theater is not like theater is part of the experience is that you go there and there's the social aspect, there's the talking with others before, if there's an intermission, talking with them during that break, but also during the performance, if someone gasps, if someone laughs, if someone leaves, that's part of the experience. And
Sure.
so that doesn't really translate to me watching a video of a performance from the past, nor something that was intended only for this medium on a screen. So I think, how can we be creative
Yeah.
and adaptable, and also being kind to one another who are just not into doing that right now.
Yeah.
Because I think it goes back to what you're saying earlier about fragility. It's really startling to have one's entire livelihood vanish
Yeah.
just like that. And so the prospect of rebuilding or building something new can be very daunting. And also, I think for some, they're saying, not interested because I didn't realize how fragile my life really was. I don't want to go back to that fragility. It's too much. It's
Yeah.
too
Well, and
scary.
also the idea of, build something new in what world? Because we don't know yet,
Yes,
yet
for sure.
what this world is looking like.
For sure. Because there's concerns about what is the political climate going to be. Theater, especially, is often supported by a mixture of private and public funds from various sources. Those are going to be reduced. So then, how does that affect the ability to do work?
Yeah.
If venues start closing, it's not just the staff of those venues, but it's all the artists that would present their work or be presented there. So there's so many different factors that no one really knows, because when we all went into quarantine in March, they thought maybe 3 weeks, don't worry, maybe a month. And now it'll probably be at least 2 months before New York City is able to just safely leave shelter in place. And that's
Yeah.
just what we know now. That yardstick could continue to move out. And that's makes it challenging for people to plan anything in the future.
I think that's it. And I mean, I also think it's, you and I both have had these experiences through our life of planning years on projects that were just about to take place. And then,
Yeah.
Then for one reason or another, they just don't. And even when
Yeah.
they're about to. And so, you just multiply that by thousands and you understand what
For
people are
sure.
feeling right now. All people, really, I mean, it's a challenging time. And I think that's why, again, to hammer it in, that's why I just thought it's an interesting conversation to look at kindness right now when it seems such a harsh time. And to remember that kindness is a human quality, but it can be also a community or a societal quality.
Yeah.
And that I think that innately theater artists, maybe unconsciously a lot of times, we practice kindness in a way that if we bring it more to a surface now, we can help ourselves and we can help those who live amongst us as well. I mean, for me, it's been a helpful focus, I have to tell you, to really lift my consciousness in these days toward this project and toward kindness specifically, and then afterwards, next, talking about community and really starting to see the deep interconnection between those things.
Absolutely.
I have thought for many years how theater just has so much to offer outside of the event of theater itself, that its process and its the qualities of its community and what it brings out in human beings at all levels just is such an offering to give outside of the theater houses that you have to spend $65 to go see a ticket in.
Yeah. And I think too is just like not all business people in America are greedy, corrupt people. It's not like all theater people are generous, kind, loving people
No,
either. So I think,
because we're human beings.
yeah, because we're human beings and everyone is different. So that's why I'm always trying to be qualifying about, well, there's something about the practice or the activity which perhaps engenders the possibility or the greater likelihood for kindness, because it cannot occur without the collaboration with others. Like it's so intrinsic. And particularly when you're in a non-commercial theater environment, it's all about that community and that adoration for one another and for the work itself.
Yeah.
Which and especially in the kind of experimental or avant-garde or more risk-taking theater, there's not a lot of money on the table. It's a lot of money for, I mean, all the money that is there is great, but it's not a lot of money compared to what The Lion King makes in a week
Or a
on
day.
Broadway, or how much Jeff Bezos makes in an hour. It's nothing. So that being said, there is a kind of the fabric of the theater practice is often based on relationships and goodwill and kindness and character. So it's not the only; those aren't the only keynotes, but I think they are ones that keep it going.
Yeah.
And so it's not just this like, well, we don't have any money, so you're fired. It's more of like, well, none of us have any money. What can we do to try to make this artistic work happen, make sure everyone's eating, make sure that we can pool resources together so that in the future, when this happens again, we have more security for all of us, because if nothing else, the coronavirus moment we're all experiencing is highlighting the problems that we have, which
Yeah.
it's not as though they just happened, a month ago. They've always been there, but now we're really seeing in painfully stark relief how systemic they are, how vast they are, and it's an opportunity to say, let's get rid of that. We really need to have a better system, a better plan for the future for human beings. And I think, um, you know, the thinking of theater people tends to be more group oriented. So it is an opportunity, I think, for us to um, contribute to that conversation. But it's also, again, like some people are not ready because they've seen their livelihoods vanish. And it's I think the restaurateur is also a good example, because if you have a storefront with, for a bar, you can't really shift that online. I mean, I guess to some degree you could, but really you got to get people to move in there, get some cocktails, socialize, hang out. So even when it's safe to go in public, there'll be some that will go, but not a lot. And so that's a real concern, because they have a lot of expenses to keep that physical space operational. And so what do? I mean, this kind of like, yeah, just go online, work from home. It's like, doing what? I mean, it's a restaurant, it's a bar, it's a nightclub, it's a dance center, it's a theater space. I mean, these things are built upon the people going out and socializing. And not only that, but they're all interrelated. Like you go to dinner, then you see the show, then you pick up maybe some flowers or a card to give to your actor friend who's in the show. Then you go to another bar and it's late. I'm not going to take the subway. I'm going to take a cab. I mean, there's all these like ways that the money's moving, that if you take away that entire fabric, yeah, you can order from Seamless and have stuff delivered and watch, the new season of Westworld, I guess, but it's just not the same.
Mm.
So
I think that it takes back to this question of fragility and honesty. Like that's how I want to close the conversation. Is you brought up two important words, that I think that three really: fragility, honesty, and relationships. That when we're looking at kindness, we should take all of that into account. That that we are fragile. This is a fragile moment. That we have to be honest about that, and that we need each other to get through it. And I mean, I think that when I look at past, work experiences, like when, any of them practically, there's always moments of fragility, and there's always moments where honesty is required in our work, and it's all relational based. So, these are the values that once we can get out of our social distancing, that hopefully in one way or another, we can all spend some time really contemplating and preparing for, because we're not going to heal this world or repair out of this moment alone. That
for sure,
that's not going to happen. And I keep going back to that, that thought that that we as theater artists have something to offer when that time comes, not out of an obligation, but out of a sense of those honest qualities that we market in. That's our trade, our soul trade, and our life trade. And I think it's going to be tough for many individuals, but it's collectively it's going to be tough. So we accept that, and then we find a way. It's like, I mean, God knows, some of the best work I've ever done was with not a dime of a budget, right? I mean, we've done things like that.
Yeah.
Because our intention was clear.
Yeah. And I think, I think also in every moment, every day, there's an opportunity to be kind. I mean, it is a muscle that could be strengthened.
And very good.
It doesn't have to always. I think sometimes when we think kindness as like a concept, we tend to think vast and huge, but kindness can be also very immediate and simple.
Yeah.
But it's a choice, and it takes reaching out and opening oneself to others. I had an experience recently of going to the bodega. God bless New York City to bodegas who are open 24 hours during this time, so that people like me who run out of toilet paper or milk or orange juice or whatever can go there at 11 o'clock at night and just run back to my apartment. But so I went there, and I had my mask, and the other guy behind the register had his mask. And as I was bringing my belongings to the counter, I said, "How are you doing?" I could have just done the transaction and left, but I said, "How are you doing?" We had a 15-minute conversation about how work is going, how tough it is, who we knew that were sick, who we knew who had died, what was important. And it's the same things we're talking about now, about we got to just help each other. We can't do this alone. We have to stick together. But I felt like it was also this hunger that both of us had to just connect with a real person, to see, how are you? Just to see, because that question implies, is there something I can do for you?
Sure.
And that's a kind act, even if it's like, I can't help you, but I want to know if I can or not. I'm willing to entertain the possibility. And I think that's something we can all do with everyone, anywhere. Like if we go to the post office, thank the postal workers for doing their job, because many of them are walking around with all these coughing of passing runners and people not wearing masks and whatever, but they're still delivering our groceries, our mail, our birthday cards, our, whatever, Same thing with the folks at my local Fine Fair grocery store. It's like, thank you so much for being here and working. Like, unfortunately, sometimes it takes a crisis for us to realize how we're all in this boat together. We're not on these separate ships just sailing off in our own directions, and we're all together.
Yeah.
So the least we can do is be kind to one another.
Ooh, what a great way to end. The least we can do is be kind to one another.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Brendan, for hanging out with me and talking about
course.
this. You've given
Thank
me
you so
some
much.
really good thoughts.
Thank you for the invitation. It was a pleasure talking with you, and hope I said something helpful to your audience, and hope to stay in touch.
Yeah, of course. Absolutely. Thanks. Have a
Yeah.
good day.
Yes, you too.